993 2096 right now. That's 855 993 2096.
Welcome to another episode of Balancing Acts. I'm your host, Linda Hamilton, and this is the show dedicated to business owners who work hard every day, constantly balance competing priorities for time and money, and are trying to navigate the intricate dance of growing a successful, profitable business while keeping a healthy cash flow and keeping your personal sanity in your own personal life. So, becoming aware of the challenges and opportunities we talk about on this show are things that can help you avoid the common mistakes we see business owners make. Balancing Acts will bring you expert advice, practical tips and strategies, and inspirational stories from other business owners. We are so fortunate to have Bobby Klink with us today um, because we're going to talk about legal stuff. Not always your favorite topic for small business owners, but protecting your business is just as important as growing and profiting. So, Bobby is a Harvard Law School graduate. He is not your typical lawyer, and he doesn't do suits in his words, but hates legalese more than you do. And he has a tendency to make bad pop culture references and dad jokes. With his extensive career of 20 plus years in the legal industry, he's now focusing on making the legal stuff simple for online business owners. And he and his team have developed the Plainly Legal software to automate legal protection for coaches, course consultants, course creators, service providers. And if there was ever a contradiction in the same sentence, it's words simple and legal. So, Bobby, it's so great to have you with us today.
Well, thank you, Linda. I'm happy to be here. And I do want to say that when you said we're going to talk about legal stuff, I hope people don't just go running screaming, because I know that can be the reaction a lot of people have. But I try to make it easy and fun. And it's been a long journey. I practiced law starting back in 2002, and it took me about 15 years to start to evolve out into creating a business rather than being a lawyer first. And I've enjoyed it, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Fantastic. So you've played a number of roles in the legal professional, from prosecutor, working for judges. Um, what was it? Was there a pivotal moment that led you to actually starting your own law practice, which was, I think, your first role as a business owner, right?
Yeah, that's right. But it really starts even before that. My dad was a business owner. He owned a chain of drugstores in Deep South Texas. Basically, it was kind of the Walgreens or the CVS of Deep South Texas. And so I was introduced to the concept of owning your own business and being in charge of your life pretty much my whole life. But I was a lawyer for, I guess it was about 12 years before I really ventured out. But it was because of a mistake I'd made 10 years or 4 years earlier. So in 2010, I was transitioning out of a position as an assistant United States attorney, which is the federal prosecutor. I was one of those guys who got to stand up and say, I'm Robert Klink. Don't call me Robert, but that's my formal name, on behalf of the United States of America. And I did that for 3 years. I was transitioning out in 2010, and I decided to kind of take a different turn. Up to that point, my career had been very much what someone going to a very top law school, working at top law firms, love to do. But at that point, I joined a small entrepreneurial firm in the Washington, D.C. area and made the classic entrepreneurial mistake. I jumped in without an agreement. Now, we had an agreement, but not really. We had a bit of an agreement, but nothing about what was going to happen long term in my involvement with the firm, which, by the way, for most lawyers, that's normal. The problem was this was a firm where I would go months without getting paid because it was often contingency fee work. So I had all the downside risk and no guaranteed upside. Then my wife got pregnant with my daughter in 2013. And I started to negotiate with them and say, hey, how can I formally become a partner in the firm, be an owner with these other two guys? And we tried negotiating it. We tried working it out, and we never could make it work. And a fateful day, it was snowing. I remember it was my old house. My office at the time, my home office was in my basement of my old house, and I was holding my 3-month-old daughter on a Sunday night during a conference call when things became clear, to me at least, that we were not going to be able to work things out. And at that point, I went out and hung my shingle, created a law firm called Clink LLC. Didn't know what I was going to do, quite honestly, because I'd never really marketed before, hadn't thought about it. But that was the start of the journey. And since then, so that was in early 2014. Since then, I've done a lot of things, but I started that firm because we didn't have a written agreement in place. We didn't do the right things the right way. We didn't talk about those hard decisions up front. And so as a result, things went bad. And I tell people that the worst part of that kind of breakup with those two partners in the firm, one of those guys had flown through Hurricane Sandy on a 10-person plane from Miami down to the Bahamas to be there at my wedding. I haven't talked to him since 2014. And that kind of gives you a sense of the things that can happen. It's not just money, it's not just those things, but if you don't deal with these things, sometimes it really affects your personal life in ways you don't want to think about.
That is so true. And whether you own a legal practice, an accounting practice, or any type of partnership or joint venture with another business owners, we see it all the time. Um, yes, so true. So after starting your practice, I happen to know a little bit about your backstory with marketing, and as I say, you're an attorney with a very varied experience and full experience when it comes to business. So, what was one of the biggest challenges you faced in the early years, and how did you overcome it?
Well, so when I was starting my law practice, the big problem was I knew absolutely nothing about marketing. Quite honestly, at that point, I was you might call it the prototypical lawyer who thought of marketing as a dirty word, because that's a lot of the ways that lawyers are raised. If you think about it, lawyers sneer at what we call ambulance chasers, but basically the lawyers in the work or in kind of the sphere I had been at were the people who looked down on anyone who did any kind of marketing. And so I had to learn that as a skill. And I started by trying to learn marketing for lawyers. I read books about that. I talked to people about that. But quite honestly, that was just really bad advice because lawyers aren't great marketers. And when they talk about marketing, it's often write blog posts for other lawyers to read, hang out with other lawyers, spend time with other lawyers. I'm like, wait, but those aren't my clients. And so it didn't really work. So that was my first foray. But eventually I kind of fell down this rabbit trail or through the looking glass, whatever we want to say, that is online marketing. And I first found it through a company called HubSpot. If people don't know, they came up with this idea called inbound marketing, which is you create marketing, you create content, and then that brings people to you. They were the ones who came up with this as an idea. And I fell into that world, started learning. I had a lot of time because I didn't have a lot of clients early on. So I spent a lot of times learning that stuff and started using those practices to build my law firm practice. That worked fine. And I was able to kind of build a practice, but I was also going through a bit of a malaise in my life. And I started working with a life coach. And this would have been a couple of years, probably 2.5 years into my law firm. And I talked with her and we started about life and relationships and all those things. And after about 6 months of that, she asked me, she said, well, let's talk about your work for a little bit. And she asked me what I call the question. She said, do you like what you do for a living? And I fumbled. And for the first time, I admitted to someone other than my wife that the answer was no. And it's not that I don't love the law. I love the law. I find the law incredibly fun. I find the challenges of talking about the law, of thinking through these questions, a lot of fun. The problem was the practice of law is very different from that. And especially what I was doing. I was a litigator. So I was in fights all the time. I spent my days fighting with people, often about some of the stupidest things in the world. And what I mean by stupid, I'm not talking about the actual case. I'm talking, I would have to get in fights with opposing counsel to get them to give me legible copies of documents. And that was the kind of thing that drove me nuts. At the same time, I was having to miss my daughter's various events because my schedule was controlled not by me, but by opposing counsel, by judges, by all these other people who they would file a motion and I would have a week to respond, or a judge. There were multiple cases where a judge said, "We're having a hearing in 2 days. You must be here in person." This was pre-COVID. Now, maybe this wouldn't be the case now, but literally I would have to jump on a plane to go across the country from Washington, D.C. to California for a hearing. And that was getting really old. And so that was the start of something different. So it'd have been in early 2016, or maybe early 2017, I guess. And as life coaches tend to do, she wouldn't let me just wallow. She said, "Okay, what are we going to do about that?" And so I didn't have an idea at the time, but we started talking. And ironically, me being here is full circle because I do this quite a bit. But she said to me, she said, "You know what? I could see you going on to radio shows, podcasts, other media, and talking to business owners about the legal stuff." And I said, "Huh, it's an interesting idea." And as someone who's kind of a fire, ready, aim kind of person, I took a quick action. So by the time I had my next meeting with that life coach, it was I think it was 2 weeks later. I'd already hired a podcast booking agency to get me booked on a number of podcasts to start talking about this stuff. And it was funny. I didn't have a business at the time that I could really send people to because it wasn't for my law firm, and didn't have a plan, but I just knew I needed to get into action and get going. And that's what I did.
And I think many business owners do face some of these challenges with what they want to do, and they're not always quick to take action, which actually can really slow down your growth and get you into a bind. So I think we can all learn from how you approached those things. How do you balance the demands of your business life with your personal life?
So I balance it by being able to control my schedule and schedule things the way I want to. And what that means is sometimes or outside people wouldn't think I have balance because they would see me working on the weekend or working at night. But I do that because it allows me to randomly in the middle of an afternoon say, "You know what? It's a beautiful day out." And look over at my wife and say, "Hey, do you want to go to a lunch date? Do you want to go take our dog to the dog park? Do you want to go do those kinds of fun things?" And for example, yesterday, my brother-in-law came over and we put together a trampoline for my daughter. So there's things like that I'm able to do in the middle of the day that I couldn't do if I had a more traditional job. And I want that level of control. And so I balance that way by choosing when I'm going to work and when I'm going to be having fun.
I love that. A trampoline in your backyard. I hope you will balance the risks and rewards of jumping on that trampoline with your daughter. And we're going to take a commercial break. It was great that you shared your insights about your business growth. When we come back, we're going to talk about how you developed Plainly Legal software to help online business owners.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. By wearing a small device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers right away. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline today and learn about the latest CGM technology. Not only can a CGM immediately reduce pain, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you make better diabetes treatment decisions. And if you have Medicare or private insurance, you can see if you qualify for a CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. We'll also provide free shipping of your new CGM, and we'll bill your insurance company for you. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline to see if you qualify for a CGM at little to no out-of-pocket cost.
Do you have a car sitting around you want to get rid of? Well, here's a great idea. Donate your car now to help local veterans in your area. Yes, just make one fast call to the Veteran Car Donation Program. Within a few days, we'll come and remove your car for free. You can donate any car in any condition. We'll use our vast network to sell it. The proceeds raised go to help local veterans and their families. And you get a tax deduction. And all you need to do is make this free call. Clean your yard up, get rid of an old car, and help the vets. We make it easy. Make this free call now. Book your fast and easy pickup. Call the Veteran Car Donation Program now.
Taking a trip in the next 12 months? Airlines are under tremendous pressure and they're practically giving away their unsold seats. Like every crisis, this one will end too. But right now is the best time to take advantage of giveaway ticket prices on their unsold seats. We're not allowed to publish these low fares online. The only way to get these rock bottom giveaway prices is to call. So phone low-cost airlines now for airline ticket prices you may never see again.
Welcome back to Balancing Acts, where we're talking with Bobby Klink about legal stuff and protecting your online business. Bobby, how did your previous experience shape your approach to developing Plainly Legal?
Well, I'll try to keep this short because I could make it a very long story. But after I had decided to try to transition out of my law firm practice, I was looking for what I could do. And I recognized there was a need to help small business owners deal with the legal stuff before it became a problem. Because there was this problem I saw kept happening was people would come to me after a problem had come up. And it was at a point where I would look at them and say, well, you could hire me, but it's going to cost you more to pay me now than to just pay the other side. And it didn't make a lot of sense. And a lot of times that was caused by them going without the legal stuff at the beginning. So early on, I said, you know what? I'm going to create training and legal templates and sell that to people. That was my first idea. I saw some other people who were doing that. And obviously there were big players like LegalZoom who was doing that for a broad market. And so that was my initial idea. And that's what I did from 2017 through 2022. That was my business exclusively was doing that. Now, very quickly, I realized trying to sell legal training to business owners, not a good plan. They don't want to pay for the training. They want the problem solved. And so I started giving the training away for free and selling the templates. But last year, at the beginning of the year, I just was looking around and I said, you know, I think we need a bigger solution here because getting it in writing is one thing people need to do, but that's not everything. And I knew that as a lawyer, I knew that all the way. And so I started thinking bigger. And that's when I started thinking about creating a software solution that would allow for a much broader solution to help people understand what they needed to get solved and to help them actually solve the problem. So that's kind of the backstory of how I entered this space and then eventually said, you know what, I need to do something bigger. I need to create a software solution.
Great. And I have tested the Plainly Legal as well as the legal templates previous to that. So I'm very familiar with your work. How are some of the ways small business owners can use these templates? You know, do they actually take the place of an attorney? What should we think about as we're using them?
So I've always told people that when you think about legal protection, you should think about levels of good. There is no question that having a lawyer who understands your business and your type of business and your circumstances exactly, that'll be the best solution to getting an agreement. There is no question. I'm never going to argue to the opposite. But what I'll tell you is that if you had to do that for everything, every agreement you need in your business, you're not talking thousands of dollars, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars in a year. And that's just reality. And for most businesses, that's not doable. That's not feasible. And one of the things that's very kind of complicating here is that the type of businesses I serve, coaches, course creators, consultants, et cetera, they happen to have entered an area of business that creates all kinds of legal issues. And it's not like you solve it once and it's done. So if you create a brick and mortar business somewhere, oftentimes you're doing the same thing over and over again. You're not going to need new agreements. You're not going to need new things. You're going to get it solved at the beginning and you're done. The businesses I serve tend to be evolving, changing over time. And so the reality is they just can't afford it. And so we view ourselves not as a replacement for lawyers, but as a solution for people who would otherwise be going without protection because something is better than nothing. And we think our stuff is pretty good. We've worked very intently. When you use my software, you're getting agreements with language drafted by me, logic created by me, but customized by you for your particular business. And we've done as much as possible to take out the chances that you could make mistakes. That's one of the other big differences in the software versus our templates. With the templates, people could edit and change and do anything they wanted to, which was great, but it meant that people were afraid sometimes that they might mess something up. With the software, we try to make it so that you don't do that. You answer questions and it does most of the customization for you. You can still edit it, but we'll warn you if you're going to do something that might cause trouble too.
That is that's perfect. So when I think about, for instance, an example of the complexity really of some of the legal issues with online stuff, which I'm pretty savvy. I'm a CPA. I work with many lawyers. I teach workshops for business owners. I will say when you talk about the fact that they can't afford things, they not only can't afford things, they will choose not to spend the money because there are other things competing for that money. So I think your software is a first step in being able to see what kind of protection I need. But here's my question about one of the features. For example, you have a legal audit built in, which I love checklists and audits, being the CPA nerd that I am. And so I got this long list of things, but it was based on data I entered. So for instance, if I want to use an online calculator, a profit calculator to help my clients play with their numbers, what if there was an agreement in there? I thought, I never heard of this. So how can we prevent some of the mistakes that you see we make?
Yeah. So, and I think let me step back because a lot of people ask me, what's the biggest mistake that business owners make or online business owners make when it comes to legal stuff? And they want me to sometimes give a very concrete example. And I think the bigger kind of meta mistake, if you will, is that they're not thinking about the legal stuff and not recognizing that decisions that you're making on a regular basis have legal implications. And that's kind of the first level. And when I've interviewed people in my audience and asked them what a lot of people say for market research, the most important question, which is what is the biggest pain point or frustration or struggle when you're trying to, and then you fill in what you do. And with me, it's with the legal stuff. And we actually heard the same phrase, exact same phrase from multiple people. And even people who didn't use this phrase, when you looked at their answer, they were saying the same thing. And that phrase is, I don't know what I don't know about the legal stuff. In other words, they have no idea what they even need to be thinking about. And so, kind of as you said, at that point, a lot of times they just say, I'm not going to worry about it. And some of that is a decision of, I'd rather spend my money, my time, et cetera, on marketing, on sales, et cetera. And some of it is lawyers have made this very difficult. There's a really stunning statistic that I discovered. I don't know if you know, but LegalZoom went public in about 2020 or 2021. And when you look at their data and then you look at other data, only 3% of legal service is delivered online. That compares to 40% of medical service and like 70% of financial services. With all due respect to my lawyer brethren, there is no reason that we can't be doing this and helping people as well. And so that's kind of what I've tried to do. And I've tried to help people do that. And so when you mentioned the audit, that was our attempt to help solve that first foundational problem. I don't know what I don't know about the legal stuff. And I said, hey, if we can give people, instead of saying, hey, go take a course or go read a bunch of stuff that's general, if we say, no, you provide information to us and our system will figure out what you need to do from that, that would allow them to actually kind of overcome that. And it was complicated. It requires a lot of logic and background of understanding how computer and computer science works, which I have enough knowledge to be dangerous, and combine that with my legal knowledge to be able to work with programmers to get this system to work.
Thank you for that. And Isn't it true that some of the business owners, let's say you went through these templates or this legal audit, which is based on your own business model, you could actually take those drafts of agreements and then have a discussion with an attorney, because it will shorten the research time. It'll give you a clear question to ask. I think, can that help cut down on your costs by framing the right question?
Yeah, it definitely can. And so again, the first thing people need to know is they need to have enough knowledge to understand what they need to be thinking about. Because as I said, you're making legal decisions decisions all the time that have legal implications. So first off, the audit, once we're making that publicly available, which as we're recording this is hopefully in a couple of weeks, that's going to be absolutely free. You're not going to have to pay anything for that because we think people ought to know what they need to deal with when it comes to legal stuff. Now, as to the agreements, yes, you could create agreements with our system and go take them to a lawyer. Now, I will caution you that you will have to find a lawyer who's open-minded because there are some lawyers who will refuse and they'll say, no, I want to draft it from scratch. Now, in my view, whether that's a lawyer or anyone else, and I don't say this just as someone who obviously, I'm giving you these drafts. I wouldn't work with someone who took that approach, whether it's a lawyer, a CPA, or anyone else. If I brought you something, I would want you to say, hey, I can work with this. I can start this. And so you'll have to do that. But I will tell you, some lawyers will refuse. And that'll happen. But then you'd have to make the decision, do you want to work with that lawyer or would you rather go try to find someone else? And part of this is, the struggle that you have to deal with is that if you're building an online business based upon expertise, oftentimes you're doing things that have kind of a very weird combination of legal issues. There's contract law issues, there's business law issues, there's advertising and marketing law issues, there's privacy law issues, there's intellectual property law issues. There is all of this stuff wrapped up in what you're doing. And you have to find a lawyer who understands all of that, which can be a challenge. And that's some of the stuff you have to think about. I can tell a funny story. When I was first coming to prominence in the online world, it was back when GDPR, European law, was going into effect about privacy. And there were people who came to me because I kind of rose to a bit of online fame in some circles by doing some free training on that. And they came to me and were asking me questions. And one person literally told me she wanted to create an online course about how to create a maid service, like create a business as a maid, and went to a local lawyer who said, oh, you could never do that. Your potential liability would be so huge because what if someone took this advice and somehow mixed chemicals wrong and killed themselves? And I was like looking and I was like, wait, what? I mean, of all the things to worry about, that's not it. But it was this microcosm of like, some lawyers are so like, in their own world that they don't think about these things. And you have to be willing to kind of broaden your horizon and say what's possible.
And they're in the protection business. And
Yeah.
so, that's what they do. But we're going to take a commercial break and come back and talk about business growth and strategy.
Are you nearly maxed out on your credit cards? It doesn't matter if you're using your credit cards for fun or to survive. At the end of the month, your statements come in, and you can either pay them or you can't. If you can't, late fees and interest rates get tacked on. And now you're struggling just to make the minimum payment due. Do you feel trapped? Am I talking to you? Good, because I personally researched some companies that can help you. They may be able to reduce your credit card balances by 50% and stop the late fees. If you qualify, please call our special debt hotline number right now for a complimentary free 5-minute consultation. Deal with your credit card problem now before it gets much worse and put more money back in your pocket. Trust me, I've been there too. Call right now.
Call 855-993-2096 right now. That's 855-993-2096.
How would you like to go on a 5-star vacation for just $99? We're talking about the quality of a Westgate resort for $99. Not for one night, but for 3 fantastic nights at one of their luxurious destinations across the United States. And you'll even get a free $100 Visa gift card just for making a reservation. We've got some of the choicest destinations that you'll love in the United States that you can choose from for just $99 for a 3-night stay. Take your family, take a special loved one, but get away. Go on vacation with Westgate Resorts. Call now to make a reservation for just $99, and you get a free $100 Visa gift card. Call Westgate right now and book your vacation. Here's the number.
Call 877-930-3491. That's 877-930-3491. Again, 877-930-3491.
Do you have diabetes? If you have insurance, you may qualify for a new continuous glucose monitor. With a CGM, you can continuously track your levels and trends, spend more time in range, significantly lower your A1C, and share important data with loved ones and caregivers. Most importantly, a CGM eliminates the one thing most people with diabetes hate: painful finger sticks. Take charge of your health. Order your new continuous glucose monitor today. If you use insulin and have seen your diabetes care provider within the last 6 months, you may qualify for a CGM today. We'll do all the insurance paperwork and deliver your new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost to you. Medicare and most insurances cover continuous glucose monitors, so don't wait. Have your insurance handy and call the CGM Health Hotline now.
Welcome back to Balancing Acts, where we're having a great discussion with Bobby Klink about using online tools as well as all the legal agreements that you have to be aware of in running your online business. And now we're going to talk about business growth and strategy while balancing risk and reward. And Bobby is both an attorney, a founder of software, but he's a business owner too. So many of the things all of us in the audience and other business owners face, he does as well. So what were your strategies for getting the word out about Plainly Legal and how it could help online business owners?
Yeah, so I have faced a bit of a challenge, which is that when it comes to my products, and this goes from before Plainly Legal, but when I was selling templates, but the business overall, I'm competing for the same, or for attention with people who are talking to my audience about how they're going to make more money. And so if you can listen to someone talk about how you can make more money or the boring legal stuff, it can be a challenge. And so we've always faced that challenge. And I've said that considering how boring my product is, my marketing has to be fun. And so I've done that for a long time and made it enjoyable. But I've also made a very conscious decision not to do the obvious thing. And what I mean by that is the obvious way to get the word out would be to tell horror story after horror story after horror story and scare people to death. And this actually, a funny story about this, I was in a mastermind group with other people making 6 and 7 figures in business. And this would have been, I guess, in 2019. And after our first in-person get together, the leader of the group was reading this book. It's called Breakthrough Advertising. It's thought of as one of the great copywriting books. It's from like the 60s. And he took a screenshot of a page that talks about, most copywriters think it's impossible to write a headline for a preventative product. And he was literally putting this in the group for me. And he said, but the writer that said, it's not impossible, but what you have to do is make your audience not think about bad results for them, but think about bad results for people they care about. So they were using, this person was talking about insurance in that context. And one of the people in the group commented and said, oh, Bobby, I could see you talking about how people end up getting divorced and all, just went on this whole other thing. And I was sitting there saying, well, if you get a divorce because you didn't have the right agreement in place, I think your marriage was probably on the rocks to start with. I don't think it was the agreement that was the problem. But so I've intentionally not done that and instead been empowering. And kind of harkening back to the last segment, I talked about lawyers, and you mentioned, Linda, these lawyers, they're in the protection business. And so, yes, I'm in the protection business, but I'm a business owner first at this point. And so I want to help people understand, here are the risks. You have to decide which of these things you're going to deal with. And let me be clear, having spent a lot of time working with in-house counsel at big companies, no one deals with all the legal stuff ever. It just doesn't happen. It is always a matter of triaging and dealing with the most important tasks, and sometimes looking and say, you know what, we have a budget, whether it's money or time, of X this year to deal with legal stuff. What's the most important stuff? And let's deal with that. And so that's the approach I've taken. And when we talked about the audit, that's why when we were creating the audit, we've prioritized the tasks. And we kind of have a proprietary algorithm behind the scenes that's prioritizing based upon the chance of something bad happening, the magnitude of what would happen if a bad thing happened. And those are kind of the bad things. But then the counter is, how hard or easy would it be to solve? So things that you could solve in like 5 minutes, we put as high priority because we're like, just do it, just get it done. But other stuff that's going to cost you time, going to cost you money, we have to say, okay, well, what's the downside here? And balance it. And so I have taken a much more pragmatic approach. And as we move into this, we're moving into a new world or new approach, which is we're going to move to what's called a product-led growth approach to marketing. And that is, I'm going to give people this audit for free. Now I got to get their attention. I'm going to say, I may have to jump up and down and do other things to get people to pay attention. But once they pay attention, I'm simply going to present the facts to them. Say, here's your free results. You can manage your tasks in here for free. Don't have to think about it. You decide what to do. And I believe, maybe naively, but I believe, and this has been my experience at least, when people know the legal stuff they have to deal with, they deal with it. And so that has been our challenge, but also how we will approach it and how we're going to continue to evolve moving forward.
And, both in my CPA practice of more than 3 decades, and I teach business planning and strategy workshops for women business owners across the country. And when this topic comes up, I think the same thing when it comes to taxes or anything regulatory or compliance, where you kind of, it's there, but you don't really want to deal with it. I always say, knowledge is empowering. You can then take that knowledge and decide on your own tolerance for risk. It's not for me to tell you or you to tell them. They have to say, here's my exposure. But what we can do as professionals is to guide them through, kind of putting a measure of the exposure and how big an impact would that be on their operations or their profit and bottom line, if in fact one of these negative consequences happen. And that, I think, that helps you make smarter business decisions.
Yeah.
So you're now developing, it's really like a SaaS product, right? There's a lot that goes into developing the product and having all the integrations work. Were there any setbacks you faced? And what were the lessons learned? Because I'm sure some in our audience are thinking about developing their own IP and software tools.
There have definitely been setbacks. And one of the big challenges I faced is that I would not say I'm a non-technical founder. When you're talking with software and startup founders, you hear people talking about founders and non-technical founders versus technical founders. I don't like the non-technical because I know enough to be dangerous and I understand enough at a high level, but I am not a programmer. I could not code this up. I could not write the code to make this system work. And that in and of itself creates challenges. And it's meant that we've been working with an agency. They do great work, but there's always a challenge when you're working with outside folks. And it's taken longer than we wanted. It has cost more. And that's even though I approached it as kind of like you would with construction, where I assume it's going to take twice as long and cost a lot more. I had that assumption going in, but still I underestimated the challenges going in. And there have been little things along the way that you don't think about like even our developers sometimes don't think about. We've had issues with Safari compatibility. Now we fix it each time, but for some reason, Apple, for the most part, its products just work. but its Safari browser is really weird sometimes. And so things like that. Or we'll have people say, well, I'm using it on and they name some browser that I'm like, I've never even heard of that internet browser, but they're running into compatibility issues. So there's a lot of things you just don't think about when you're creating software if it's not what you do all day, every day. And so there's some of that going in, but obviously some of the other issues we deal with is in the past, if we had a support issue, my team or I mean, we could deal with it. I could just go in and fix something. Now some of the support stuff we can't fix. And, I don't love that I have to go to our developers and sometimes it takes them a day to get to it because I don't like that. I want to solve a problem for my customers right away. So those are some of the challenges, but it's definitely been worth it. And we've had a great group of beta testers, you included, and we knew we needed that because when we were creating the agreements, there is so much conditional logic going on that we either would have had to spend probably multiple months of my team doing nothing but testing it. Or alternatively, luckily we had hundreds of you beta testers who were willing to get in there and help us test it in these big, we called them party calls where we would get on and everybody would test the same agreement and we would be able to see, okay, is the logic working? Yes or no? And we could pinpoint issues and get it fixed right away. So that's been a blessing, but the challenges are the tech challenges. I would say if you're thinking about it, be very careful and think it through because it's going to take longer and it's going to cost more than you're expecting.
Yeah, and technology definitely more, but with many things, the cost cutting, you want to know that every dollar you spend is moving you towards your growth. But at the same time, you have to be able to manage that, right? That if the funds aren't there, and you can't become a tech expert yourself. So there has to be a certain amount. I assume lessons learned are being patient and being able to communicate with tech developers who often speak their own language, just like accountants and CPAs. So right before we take our commercial break, do you have what are the plans for the future of Plainly Legal? Do you have some things coming that you might share with us?
So first I'll set a long-term vision because I like to have people understand my vision for the software is that ultimately it will really automate the legal stuff. But this is a long-term vision. And what I mean by that is my hope and vision for say 5 years from now is that if you're a subscriber to the software, you're going to have things that follow you around the internet in extensions on your browsers, et cetera, that are following and it's flagging issues in real time for you. Like if you go to post a testimonial, maybe you'll get a warning say, hey, do you have a release from the person to post this testimony? And that will literally be happening in real time. That's the long-term vision. Now, the short-term vision, we have a list of things we're working on. We're working on the audit. We're also going to create an AI-enabled chat feature, but I like to stress it's not AI chat where the AI is just making things up. But we're creating answers of lawyer-drafted answers, and the system will first try to find one of those and serve one up, but in a conversational way to help answer questions that people have. We're going to add things like e-signature. So it's just kind of built in. Again, it's a little thing, but having to have your own e-signature system outside of your legal software, maybe it's just easier if we can let you do those things. But we have a lot of plans for those things over time, because again, my vision is ultimately that Plainly, and again, maybe this is naive of me, but I think that maybe 5 years from now, the technology will get to the point that software could largely replace what lawyers could do 85% of the time. And I want to build out a system that does that, that just deals with it for you. So you don't have to think about it as a business owner. It's just done for you.
Thank you so much. And I think, thank you for sharing just the way you actually grew, the challenges you've had with it. For those of us who are thinking about our own expansion, it's very motivating. We're going to take a commercial break, and then we're going to come back and talk about Bobby about his personal insights and foundations and where he's going next.
Do you have diabetes? If you have insurance, you may qualify for a new continuous glucose monitor. With a CGM, you can continuously track your levels and trends, spend more time in range, significantly lower your A1C, and share important data with loved ones and caregivers. Most importantly, a CGM eliminates the one thing most people with diabetes hate: painful finger sticks. Take charge of your health. Order your new continuous glucose monitor today. If you use insulin and have seen your diabetes care provider within the last 6 months, you may qualify for a CGM today. We'll do all the insurance paperwork and deliver your new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost to you. Medicare and most insurances cover continuous glucose monitors, so don't wait. Have your insurance handy and call the CGM Health Hotline now.
Taking a trip in the next 12 months? Airlines are under tremendous pressure and they're practically giving away their unsold seats. Like every crisis, this one will end too. But right now is the best time to take advantage of giveaway ticket prices on their unsold seats. We're not allowed to publish these low fares online. The only way to get these rock bottom giveaway prices is to call. So phone low-cost airlines now for airline ticket prices you may never see again.
If you're on supplemental oxygen, heavy and awkward tanks can be a burden. Now you can leave home and leave the tanks behind with Inogen, portable oxygen therapy that moves with you.
With my Inogen, now I'm able to do the things that I've always loved. I just press the button here, and there's my oxygen.
Inogen systems are so small and light, you're free to leave the house without the hassles of an oxygen tank.
I could play golf again. I could go grocery shopping. I'm free again.
With the Inogen, I can handle my own oxygen. I can carry my own oxygen. I go anywhere with this. Look how small it is.
And right now, you can try an Inogen portable oxygen system for 30 days risk-free. Call us right now. If you qualify, we'll send you an Inogen system to use for 30 days risk-free. Your insurance may even cover your new Inogen system.
If you're on oxygen, you need to be using an Inogen.
Call 800-367-1753. That's 800-367-1753.
Welcome back to Balancing Acts, where we're talking with Bobby Klink about protecting your online business or your service business from legal risks and exposure using software tools and resources. Hi, Bobby. So how do you approach risk-taking in your business? And what insights can you share with myself and the audience and those of us who are not attorneys?
Yeah. So what I would say is that there's a couple different ways that we can talk about or think about risk. So some of them are the legal risk, and maybe I'm more willing to push the limits on some things than others. But when I say push the limits, let me be clear. I don't push the limits on things that are illegal. And what I mean by that is marketing and advertising law. A lot of what's happening online and the way that people are presenting things is not legal. You're not allowed to make claims about results you get for people if you don't have evidence to back that up. And I just don't do that. Separately, I don't push the envelope when it comes to other people's IP. And an example of this, these are some small things. Other people choose this differently. You'll never see me use a meme or a GIF that I find somewhere else in my marketing. The reason why is there are copyright issues there. A lot of people do it. I'm just not going to do it. I don't think it's worth the risk because I can have the same impact elsewhere. And by the way, I love GIFs. So personally on social media, you'll see me using them all the time. But from a business perspective, there's some real copyright issues if you're using GIFs or memes or anything else. So I stay away from those things. But what I like to tell people is there are things that are definitely best practices that you should do in terms of maybe getting a trademark for all these different things. I make decisions all the time about, I'm not going to worry about that trademark, about getting a trademark for XYZ, because what's the worst that can happen if I don't get the trademark? I'm very careful to not step on other people's toes, but I recognize that realistically, a lot of the stuff that we could do to affirmatively protect our IP only matters in contexts that are so unreasonable to even think about ever coming up that I'm not going to worry about it. And so, I take those risks and I make those decisions, but it's more of that triage. It's more of, what do I have the time? What do I have the energy? What do I have the money to spend on these things? But one of the things I do pretty religiously is get agreements, because you can always get an agreement with someone. And by agreements, I mean written agreements. Getting things in writing is the simplest, easiest thing you can do. That's why I started my business really with that, of getting the templates, because I've just seen way too many people have really bad things happen to them that could have been avoided with a simple written agreement. And so that's a place I don't skim. Now, other places, I'll tell you, you as an accountant, I'm sure, there are places that you have to make decisions. And I work with my accounting team and my CPAs to figure out, where am I willing to push the line a little bit on things that I don't say they're not illegal, but it's like, hey, maybe, if the IRS comes and looks at me, they may rule for me, they may rule against me. Those are things we have to decide and think about those things. And we will make those decisions. Obviously, never do anything. Like I said, I always report 100% of the revenue I get, 100% of the income. But, there are those decisions you have to make in everything you do. And I'm willing to push the line on some, but it's really kind of a gut feel more than anything else.
Yeah, and those are, sometimes there are gray areas, and you could win or lose depending on the position, the government, or your opponent on the other side of an agreement. I want to expand a little bit about what you said about the marketing, because this is coming up in every workshop that I teach. People are doing online coaching, their online courses, sales pages, lead pages. Here's an offer. Here, I'm going to do it. I did a discovery session myself. I offered recently before I did the legal audit. So tell us a little more about marketing promises. I know you had a 1-hour workshop on that, which I took so many notes. If you could just give us a couple things on that topic, I think it pertains to many in the audience.
So this is an area, so you have the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC at the federal level, but also state attorneys general. As a general rule, there are rules at every level against what could be considered deceptive advertising or deceptive trade practices. And the easiest way to think about it is at the FTC level has set out these rules. If you're making a claim about the results that your clients are likely to get, okay. So it could be making money, it could be saving money, it could be any of those things. If you're making a claim about results, you have to have substantiation to prove that the promise you're making is what the typical person will get. In other words, it's a reasonable expectation that a typical user will get from your services. And nobody is doing that online. Everybody is always cherry picking the best results. And separately, what a lot of people will tell you is, but I don't know what the typical results are. Well, under the law, if you don't know and cannot prove what the typical results are, you're not allowed to make a claim about results. And that is something a lot of people don't like. And there's a further thing I'm going to tell you that you're really not going to like, which is this isn't just you promising things. If you use testimonials that include results that those people got, that is considered by the FTC a representation about what a reasonable person can expect to get in terms of results from your product. And if you don't have data to show that that's typical, you're not allowed to use it except for some caveats. And you might be saying, oh yeah, but I just have to say results not typical. That's not good enough. If you're using a testimonial that is not typical, you're required to, number one, disclose that it's not typical. And number two, disclose what the typical results are. And the way I explain this to people is you've seen this all the time in ads for diet products. You'll have these great testimonials, but it'll say the typical user will lose 8 pounds in 45 weeks or whatever the typical results are. They have the data to back that up. And this is the area that is, I would say, being violated the most online, and it creates some exposure. Now, I'm not going to try to scare you and make you believe that if you're a small time, if you're a relatively small business, that the Federal Trade Commission is going to come after you. But they are increasing compliance issues here. State attorney generals are starting to go after these issues. So it is something you should be thinking about. You should not be making those kinds of claims if you don't have data and evidence to support that that is what most people or the typical person is getting from your program or your product or service.
talk about subjectivity and proof. With taxes, I know, okay, you have a receipt, there's the proof. But this is very, very subjective. But I would advise business owners as listening, you put this on your radar and on your list for working it out and deciding what exposure works and how you can improve on that, or add results not typical to everything.
Well,
I don't know.
and if I could, Linda, I mean, one thing I'll say is like, your testimonials don't have to be about results. You can have testimonials about how amazing you are to work with, about how you make things simple and easy to understand, for example, if that's relevant, how you and your team are ultra responsive. And quite honestly, in today's day and age, I mean, yes, the results can be what lure people in, but quite honestly, the results that lure people in are generally the types of things that are so overblown that you can't justify them. Now, and there is a caveat. If you will make a guarantee and say, if you do not get these results, I will give you a refund, that's fine. You can make that claim, but you just have to be honest with people. But like I said, luckily with me, my good result is I use Bobby's products and nothing happened. I mean, that's kind of a good result for my clients. So I've never had this. I've never been able to use these wonderful results-based testimonials. So, I mean, maybe it's kind of me, I can kind of talk about it and say, well, don't use them. And I get that they're powerful marketing, but I would stress to people that you should be careful. And I think a lot of people are starting to see through those types of claims too.
Yeah, I like how you just shared that your testimonial doesn't have to be results, but more about working with you and what they learned, maybe working with you. And I think that might be an easier path for some of us. And some business owners are, they're good at sales. That's kind of their skill. So they're going to push the envelope on some of the claims and things they make. And then there are others, knowledge workers, professionals, consultants who are going to be a little more conservative about the statements and promises they make. So thank you for sharing that very insightful advice. What legal trends are you most excited about or concerned about as they impact small businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think the legal stuff that is really I've been thinking a lot about lately is tied up with AI, and there's a lot of sticky, ugly issues there, and some of them are some of them that are resolved. I don't want to say I don't like the way they're resolved. One of them that a lot of people don't realize is it is very clear right now. Courts have decided, and the Copyright Office have decided that if you use AI to create something, it is not protected by copyright. If generative AI creates an image, it is not protected. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have the right to use it. It means that anyone else could just copy it from you and use it too. And it seems to me, and I would say it's hard to say exactly because things have changed so quickly. At the beginning of last year, if you wanted to get good images from AI, you really had to do a lot of prompting. Nowadays, you don't. But that may evolve, that may change, but I do see a lot of issues coming up there and people taking other people's copy and using it. And quite honestly, I don't understand how any of these AI generation engines are not guilty of copyright infringement, not for reproducing it, but literally taking the data and making a copy of it to ingest and train their model. That is copying copyrighted work. And so there's a lot of interesting issues that are going to come up there. And I'm glad I'm kind of on the sideline. I'm not litigating this stuff, not looking at it, but it is very interesting. And I think there are going to be things we're going to have to think about and understand as business owners about it moving forward.
Thank you for that. And that, you can't do anything now without talking about AI. I learned so much from talking to you, as I do every time I listen to one of your sessions. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us ideas about how to handle our marketing, sharing your legal audit. I hope people will check that out. How can people find you?
The best way is just plainlylegal.com. I'm not that active on the socials because I prefer to do other things. But if you go to plainlylegal.com, that's always the best way to get in our world, get the free kind of guidance, and then go from there.
Thank you very much. Again, fascinating conversation. I hope you'll join us for our next episode of Balancing Acts, where we'll bring you another very insightful guest and expert to share practical tips and strategies.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.
Are you nearly maxed out on your credit cards? It doesn't matter if you're using your credit cards for fun or to survive. At the end of the month, your statements come in, and you can either pay them or you can't. If you can't, late fees and interest rates get tacked on. And now you're struggling just to make the minimum payment due. Do you feel trapped? Am I talking to you? Good, because I personally researched some companies that can help you. They may be able to reduce your credit card balances by 50% and stop the late fees. If you qualify, please call our special debt hotline number right now for a complimentary free 5-minute consultation. Deal with your credit card problem now before it gets much worse and put more money back in your pocket. Trust me,